financial instability in these homes and an instability, most importantly, to the children in those homes. You see, I believe one of the greatest gifts that we give to our children is an education, but a system that is creating a financial instability in a home or adds to the burden of a more transient lifestyle is an educational system that is failing these children. Property tax reform, as the historical record clearly demonstrates, does not work. The few crumbs that fall off the table of the relief table are quickly eaten away by later property tax increases. And I don't know about anyone else in this room, but I know that every person that I've talked about as I've gone from one end of the state to the other on this issue, they all tell me the same thing. Not a single one of them pays their property taxes from the income they've derived from their home. The property tax should be an income tax because you're paying it with your income. If we taxed income the way we tax our homes or applied sales tax the way we tax our homes, I believe there would be an outcry across this state. Now, I understand the need to fund education, but I also understand that there is a constitutional as well as a moral and ethical principle when taxation is involved. And when it comes to property tax, it fails all three. I believe we can do better. I believe that we can find the replacement revenue to do this in a way that is fair. But I don't believe, I know, there is no tax in this state that is more unfair, more inequitable, and more unjust than the property tax. None. It's time to kill the beast.
Thank you very much, sir, for your testimony. And we'll turn to questions from the members and start with Representative Gillen.
Jim, I think you hit on something that's real important. And by the way, my 95-year-old mother is an admirer of you and your colleagues and the work that you're doing. I think you speak for them, both you and Ron. You mentioned a transient population, and that's not something we've heard a lot about here. I got a call from a borough tax collector, and she indicated to me she was seeing a lot of these substantial size number of room properties with seniors being forced out, being divided up into rental housing stock. Collaterally, the school district was reporting the turnover of the student population. We are simply not going to be successful with our students if they're coming and going and moving in and out, and I'm talking the Reading metro area. The property tax is damaging the integrity of our educational system. It's affecting outcomes. Students are not anchored in their schools. My 95-year-old mom, she would like, and one of the reasons why she's an admirer, she'd like to stay in her home. You say, well, you better prevent her from getting kicked out. Yeah, well, what about the 95-year-old or the 77-year-old I just heard from that doesn't have any children, that doesn't have a financial backstop? And these people are getting bounced out of their home, or somebody who wants to age in place. And as soon as they make changes inside their house to accommodate them, guess what happens? Instead of the government coming around and giving out awards and certificates and citations because you improved your home, they hand you a bill for improving your own home. That is un-American, that is not freedom-based, and that is wrong, and it needs to end. Finally, aerial photography. Examining your property from the air just to make sure that they haven't missed any changes you've made in improving your property. This is invasive. This is an evil. The property tax has got to go for a number of significant reasons, but the foremost, it's freedom-based to own that castle. That's the American dream. That's why people are coming over this country for a variety of reasons in a variety of ways. That's why my grandparents came from Ireland, Hungary, and Italy, because they wanted to be free. They wanted to own a piece of property. They didn't want to rent it from the government. They didn't want to get permission from the government to make an improvement on their property. And they certainly didn't want to be punished when they made an improvement on their property. This system's got to go.
Look, I couldn't agree more. We talk about the unfair assessment. You eliminate the problem, the property tax. You don't have assessments. We have no need to have an assessment. How much money does that save us alone? We just had our countywide reassessment not that long ago, $5 million. And if it works so well, why did all these people who appealed succeed? If the assessment actually works. And we keep spending money to support a system that we know is unfair. There's nobody who testified today, whether they agree with total elimination or not, there's not a single person who testified today that said property tax is working. Everybody agrees. What I'm tired of, having been doing this for 12 years now, what I'm tired of is hearing we understand it's a problem and we would support a solution. What? Give me your solution. Give me something I can work with. Stop leaving it on us, and then when we come up with a solution, we hear, well, we can't get behind that. Well, then what's your solution? Maybe I can get behind that. This has gone on far too long. I live right downtown in the city of Lebanon. I live there because I choose to live there. This is my home. I was born here. But I watch what is happening to my neighborhood. I watch the people right up the street from me who are doubling and tripling up in these little apartments, homes that were cut in half and turned into apartments. And I watch that 6 months, 8 months, a year, it's a whole new group of people moving in and out of these homes. What are we doing to these kids? And why are they doubling up? They can't afford the rent. What are we thinking? And I look at the city of Lebanon. In the city of Lebanon, the average household income is $20,000 a year less than it is at the county level. Yet they pay the highest millage rate, and the state subsidizes that school at an astronomical amount. It's not 50%. It's way over 50%. So you have the state funding that school, but yet that school district, where you have the lowest income in the county, is paying the highest millage rates. The closest is $8 mills less, which is $8 on $1,000 worth of property. And we call this fair. We call this equitable. We call it, no, it's not, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. It's not moral. And this is how we're educating our children. It has to stop. Nobody pays their taxes on their property. Nobody pays it from the income they've earned on their home. It just doesn't happen. You pay it on the income that you get, and that's how we should be paying taxes. That's how we should be funding education. And again, to repeat what Ron had said, this 50% argument, well, the more you spend, of course the 50% goes off. And if you just keep spending and spending and spending, we're getting, in the Lebanon City School District, we're getting the COVID. I mean, what are we doing? After spending years revitalizing the junior high school, we're building a junior high school. There's something wrong with this kind of rationale. We can't just keep doing this. We all have to learn to live within our budgets. We have to, and if things start going up, we have to learn where we cut back, what we do. But that's the way it works in the home, and that's the problem. With everything, the buck always stops with the homeowner. You can talk about unfunded mandates all you want. There's no such thing as an unfunded mandate because I'm paying for it. I'm funding that mandate. And we can talk about all this stuff all we want, but until we start talking about this from the viewpoint of the people who have to pay it, it's a mute issue. We must be part of this discussion.
Representative Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of good things were spoken about here tonight and today. And there's a couple things in the last couple testifiers that came to my mind, and we talked about consolidation and some of those things. And I think overall expense should always be looked at. And I know as a school director, was a time when a adjacent school district to all the points made here today, they had no room for expansion. They had no industrial tax base. They had no commercial tax base. It was all on the homeowners, and they had massive debt service. No school district touching that school district wanted to take it on because of their debt. And so that's another challenge to the consolidation part that I thought Ron was touching on as a difficulty. But, sir, Jim, you brought up the Constitution again, and it's been mentioned a few times, and I know there's a lot of discussion on constitutionality, and there was also a comment earlier about, a case that I think is going to be rather interesting as to see what our Supreme Court does, which typically comes down to this idea of, will there be this balance of funding? And I think we could take that equation out of educating our kids so that there would be a stability to the educating of our children if we didn't have that fight all the time. I'll give you another example of something I voted against, and that was the soda tax. How is that even unconstitutional, in my mind, to tax somebody across the line because they bought a soda there, to educate our children? That was my point. So, and I also think when you go to the Constitution, when it talks about the responsibility of the General Assembly, I mentioned this several times to some colleagues. It didn't go over well, but I'm going to mention it here. If you take the responsibility of the General Assembly constitutionally and you compare it to the line items in our budget, I think you have to check that pretty close as to what's the responsibility constitutionally as per what we're spending. And so Ron brought it up, you brought it up, Jim, and I'm going to say this, which has been very difficult for me to digest. But when I came in and sworn in 2011 to the House, do you know what our budget was? $27.3 billion. Do you know what it was this year? 40.8. That's the 50% you're talking about that it increased since I've been there. So, if there was a will, there's a way. And if there's a way to consolidate, if there's a way to go constitutionally to what our responsibilities are and compare it to how we should be educating our kids, I don't think there would be a more easier way to feel convicted about how we did that. So I appreciate what you brought up. And I just needed to add that in the light of the frustration of...
I'm with Ron on consolidation. I'm not opposed to it, but I do know we had 1,800 school districts in 1965, and the push was to go to 500 school districts. And we went to 500 school districts by 1989, and the cost of education tripled during that time. So we need to weigh this stuff carefully. In other words, be careful what you ask for. What we're looking at, and I think this is the most important aspect, oftentimes people complain about things like the property tax. We're not asking for you to get rid of the property tax. We're not asking you not to fund education. What we're asking you is find the replacement revenue that is necessary, and we're willing to pay that. We're just not willing to allow our homes to be held hostage by a school district. It's done. It's time to end.
Representative Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jim, for your testimony. You and Ron have probably elucidated this issue probably closest to my position. And, we've seen here today exactly what I said at the beginning of this meeting. So whenever you start talking about eliminating property taxes or doing something about property taxes, people want to get into the weeds on other things about how, what the school spending is, whether we're teaching CRT or whatever. None of that matters when it comes to should we tax properties for this purpose or not. None of that matters because those conversations can be held, and look, we're all going to have differing opinions on them. None of those matters when it comes to talking about, is it proper to fund education is it proper to tax property? I mean, that's the basic question, and you hit the nail on the head. It's part of the very first section of the very first article of our Pennsylvania Constitution is our right to acquire, possess, and defend property. So it really does come down to a numbers game here. I mean, beyond the principle, it's a numbers game. And let's think about the numbers overall here. Just doing some quick math on the numbers we were provided today, $15.1 billion collected through school property taxes this year, divided by 13 million people. That's $1,162 for every man, woman, and child in Pennsylvania that we're paying into property taxes to fund education. $1,162. That's $22.35 a week for every man, woman, and child. That's $3.19 a day for every man, woman, and child. Okay, that's what we have to figure out on the other side of deciding we're not going to tax properties anymore. And not taxing properties anymore is also going to save us money. You mentioned the $5 million that we spent here in Lebanon County to reassess properties. And if I recall correctly from those days, it was $55 per property to determine just for the initial assessment, $55. What other tax system do we spend $55 to figure out how much somebody owes? We don't do it on any because it's a percentage. Well, if you earned $100, you pay $3.07 in tax. That's pretty easy. That doesn't cost you $55. It's absolutely ludicrous what we spend to assess properties. And here's the other place it comes down to a numbers game for me. As a legislator, I think about my constituents. Property owners far outnumber any school board members in my district, school business administrators in my district, any school employees in my district are far outnumbered by property owners, and certainly property owners far outnumber legislators. So we ought to be listening to the property owners and standing up for their rights rather than dealing with, what is the school spending money on? Well, that's not the issue here. The issue is the property tax fair? And as I said at the beginning, as you said it, and I believe as Ron said, it is not fair. It is inequitable. And it absolutely, positively needs to be abolished once and for all and permanently in Pennsylvania so it can't come back and haunt us like a zombie as well. And that's why we've got to do it with a constitutional amendment, and that's why I have House Bill 302. If you have any comments in response to what I said, I will say this about consolidation. Let's not confuse consolidating school districts with consolidating facilities. It doesn't mean we have to all go to the same high school if we consolidate school districts. So let's keep that in mind. I think people get confused about that. Right. We can consolidate 2 school districts and create 14 little high schools that are more like a community school than this big consolidating thing. So, but your testimony and Ron's have struck closest to my opinion, and I the question is clear. It's not fair, and we shouldn't be doing it. End of story. Period. Thank you.
I believe, in response to your constitutional amendment, I've been doing this for 12 years. Ron and I spent 6 years going county to county to county. And I can tell you overwhelmingly there is a support to eliminate. And it doesn't matter where you go. We hear about, these certain counties and their taxes are low. We've done town halls there. They support it. We've been across the state. We know there's the universal support. But what we can't seem to do is generate the political will, because we always get mired in the details. What about doing this tax? What about doing this tax? What about the advantage of the constitutional amendment is that it forces a deadline where it must be done, and that would force the issue to be dealt with. I don't know that if we keep doing this the way we're trying to do it through a proposal that will get it through, that we're ever going to get it through, because somebody's always going to say, well, I'm perfectly fine with eliminating the property tax as long as I don't have to contribute to the replacement revenue. And we can't go down this path. If it's going to be fair, it has to be fair for everyone. It has to apply to all of us equally. So I'm not opposed to a constitutional amendment. I'm not opposed to anything to get this done. I'm not opposed to anything that's going to help drive down the cost of education. If you can demonstrate to me that consolidation is gonna help to drive down education, I'll be right there. But we cannot keep. I know what I have to do in my home. If I want to keep paying my bills. Actually, my wife pays my bills, but if she's going to keep paying the bills, we have to have a balanced budget. And the only way we have a balanced budget is if we make things work. And it's about time the government at every level, from our school boards all the way up to the President of the United States, starts making balances, making budgets work based on the money they had to spend, not on spending the money of future generations.
Yeah, and let me just add to what you said. When I talk about my constitutional amendment to get rid of property taxes, people go, well, what are you going to replace it with? In a very broad sense, I don't care. I don't care what you replace it with, because everything else, every other tax system in Pennsylvania is much fairer than the property tax. So it doesn't, I mean, look, I'm going to argue with you back and forth on how we're going to do it, but it just doesn't matter in the broad sense of whether we should. That's not going to hold me back. What replacement revenue system we use, it does not hold me back, and I don't care what it would be, from saying it's still better than taxing property the way we are now. So
if it does become a constitutional amendment, then everybody will then understand property tax is going to be eliminated, and now they'll start working with us to eliminate it.
I'll have that wrestling match later. It's not a problem, and I'll deal with that, but let's get rid of them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you. And our last testifier is our host today, Representative Frank Ryan, who's going to testify before the committee. You may have seen him circling around the room, sweetening everybody up.
Was that ethical?
Thank you for the cookies.
Yeah, you're welcome. Actually, thank Jamie Miller and Faith Bucks for the cookies. They did a
Thank you
great
very
job.
much. Representative Ryan, you may proceed.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. And I do apologize a little bit. I have a audit committee meeting that we have to run to on the pension system fairly quickly, since I'm spending all my time on that. Let me make a comment. Representative Mike Jones made a comment to me when he first got elected. And he said, unless you're drawing blood and having blood drawn, you're not really fighting for property tax elimination. And after he introduced the bill and we went down to his district, and I went down to Representative Kiefer's district and Representative Klime's district, we had a hostile audience, right? And by the time we were done the discussion, the audience wasn't so hostile as we explained what it was, because a reporter put out a headline that was unbelievably disingenuous and dishonest. And so it put us behind the eight ball. Ron, you and I sat down in my office and we talked for a couple of hours and we had a discussion, and I think you became a supporter. Oh, I was a supporter before that. You're not helping my discussion, Ron, so please. If I wanted your input, I would have asked for it. So just don't ever invite a relative to a meeting. Sorry, Ron. I'm not really sorry, but it sounded funny. But what happens, though, is that due to some misunderstandings, and I'm not a marketing person, I'm a CPA, which means that I don't necessarily have to have a personality. But after the discussions that we had in Representative Kiefer's and Klime's district and Representative Jones' district, I think the audience was much more subdued. And one of the people came up and asked me the question, and he said, you know, this is really a good idea. We ought to look at it. And I'm not here to sell that idea right now. I'm here instead to talk about whether or not we're going to get this thing done. Rhetoric is not going to get this done. Details is going to get this done. I read the financial reports for all 500 school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The bill that we had introduced would have gotten rid of all the debt in the bill with no residual debt, and property taxes would be eliminated. 100%. They need to go. Citizens in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania don't trust the government any longer because of the dishonest representations that had been made in the past. Candidly, I happen to be one of them. And I think many of you here are also of the same ilk. We've heard comments that the casino revenues were going to do away with it, and obviously we know that that didn't work. But one of the comments that came out when I was down in Representative Jones' district after we sat there, he said, you know, you ought to really go around the state. And I said, I've convinced 100 people this evening. I only have to convince 1.2 million more people. and it's not achievable at age 70 to be able to pull that off. So here's some comments that I want to make to you. I've never seen a tax as egregious as the property tax. It's immoral. Chairman Causer made a comment, and I thought it was really an appropriate one. Just to give you an example. If you have a property located in Lebanon City School District area, and compare that to a property right across the street from Southwest Elementary School, the property tax on the property that's in North Cornwall Township would be 40% of the 60% of what that same property would be if it were across the street. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. No one should have to ask Representative Gillen that her mom would like to stay in the house when they're done. That's an immoral question to have to even contemplate. I spent 41 years in the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps Reserve. I spent time in Afghanistan, and subject near and dear to my heart right now. Not so that I would have to ask my government for permission to be able to allow me to stay in my house. I want to get rid of property taxes for a couple reasons. Individuals are but one life event away from losing their home. If you're retired and your spouse dies, you're probably going to have to move. That's wrong. At probably the worst time in somebody's life to have that happen. School districts, so that you are aware, have a claim against your property because of the way that we tax. Representative Klein and myself and O'Neill have a series of bills that say that the property tax liens would go in order in the date in which filed. So let me give you an example. In Pennsylvania, if we have a mortgage and you fall behind on payment of your property taxes, that lien immediately preempts your mortgage. So when your home is sold, you may only be able to sell it for the value of the property taxes, but you're going to still owe the mortgage. For us seniors, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at me and say that I'm one of the seniors. Who said true? We've got a peanut gallery in the back here, by the way. And it's just a proof positive you passed your hearing test. Congratulations. No. $11 billion of our budget goes to taking care of us seniors. And we pay under $2.5 billion in taxes. Younger people are making the comment to us is when we get rid of a tax that gets shifted to us, you're basically saying you're going to shift the entire tax burden in the Commonwealth to people who are working. Representative Gillen, if you think younger people are leaving the state now, wait until you see how quickly people leave when that happens. It's an ugly sight, and I've done the calculations on it. When you take a look at some issues, I want you to just keep this in mind. 17 years, property taxes will double. In 25 years, they will triple. And this is what I found out after getting the bloodbath over the past couple of years. The final comments will be my last few comments. Everybody wants to eliminate property taxes as long as somebody else is going to pay the tax. The hold harmless agreements and the fair funding formula, even under the new funding formula, are anything but fair. If you live in Philadelphia, you get 65% of your budget from the state. If you live in Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, or York County, Pennsylvania, you get about 20% from the state. That's inherently wrong. Many perceive that property taxes are the most stable, and actually they're not. If you were to talk to the rating agencies, they'll tell you that the income tax is much more stable. Even in the height of the 08 and 09 recession, the income that came in from the personal income tax was fairly significant. We're seeing that now as a result of the pandemic. Those numbers are still coming in. The complexity of our sales tax code is mind-boggling. So let me give you an example. We talked about taxing a sales tax. Representative Diamond has a bill. It's a 444 bill that basically eliminates some of the exemptions for sales tax. And somebody said, you mean to tell me that I'm going to have to pay 4% on sales tax on disposable diapers? And all I said was, if your property tax bills are $3,000 a year and you're going through $39,000 worth of diapers, you need to see a gastrointestinalitis and your pediatrician for your child rather than worry about property taxes. But finally, citizens just don't trust government to believe that a partial tax reduction will work, and I cannot support that. Let's get on there with the political will. For the public, I would ask you, when you hear rhetoric, just keep in mind it's rhetoric. When you hear someone, if I came up and said, I absolutely demand that we get rid of property taxes, I didn't really just say anything at all. You haven't said anything until you come up with a proposal that says, as an example, here's how I want to do it. So I would encourage all of us to realize this is a crisis, and my final comment is this. If we fail to resolve this problem, I made a comment 4 years ago that we have 2 to 4 years to turn around the financials of the Commonwealth, and if we don't, we're going to be insolvent in 12 years. I can tell you right now, we are on the path to insolvency. The time is now. If we don't resolve this, it's too late, and we can be prepared to help the Commonwealth and our citizens navigate a bankruptcy of almost unheard of proportions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Ryan, and I'm very confident that the members will ask you many questions offline. But I do want to say that out of all of our policy meetings, this one had the most members attend. So it shows the gravity of this issue and the fact that you can really bring the members to Lebanon County. So we're all glad to be here, and I want to thank you for your work in putting it together, and also all the testifiers that joined us today, because I think the testimony was great, and it shows the work that we have ahead of us. And I want to thank all the members, thank the public who came out to this meeting. Thank you for being here. And with that, and also thank my staff that put a lot of work into putting this together. So thank you very much. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could also, as we get ready to go, I would really like to thank Jamie Miller and Faith Bucks from my office. They did a phenomenal job.
Thank you very much.